Welcome back. Good Thursday morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. I'm Maria Bartiromo, and it is Thursday, March 19th. It is 8 a.m. on the button on the East Coast, and I hope you're having a great Thursday morning. The Pentagon is set to hold a briefing any moment now on Operation Epic Fury, and we will be monitoring it. We will bring you the latest, and we could go there live. We will let you know. But first, there's this. The Federal Reserve held rates steady for a second time yesterday, as expected, over what they claimed was elevated inflation and uncertainty around the Iran conflict. Chairman Jay Powell signaling that we will only see one interest rate cut this year. Powell also said he'll remain at the Fed until his successor, Kevin Warsh, is confirmed by the Senate and the investigation into him is over, something that I've been reporting all week and asking my guests about. Here's the comment that sent markets spiraling lower yesterday. Watch this.
I have no intention of leaving the board until the investigation is well and truly over, with transparency and finality.
Of course, Powell's term as chairman is up on May 15th. However, he can stay on the board as a governor through early 2028. Meanwhile, the war on Iran continues, and the Treasury is at the intersection of war and the economy as oil prices have moved higher in the middle of this conflict. Now entering week 3, Brent right now is up 6% at 113, and crude oil is up 1.33% right now, sitting at 97.61 on crude oil. Joining me right now is the U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent joining us. And Mr. Secretary, it's always a pleasure to see you. Thank you so much for being here this morning.
Good morning, Maria.
I want to get your take on the impact of this war on Iran. Of course, you are in the middle of this, the intersection of the economy and war. And you've been allowing oil flows from Iran, Russia, of course, what the president did in terms of Venezuela, to try to stabilize prices. But I want to get your take about that in terms of potentially funding our enemies in doing all of this. Is the reality of this oil shock as a result of this war colliding with the president's maximum pressure campaign on Iran?
Not at all, Maria, because it's the president's maximum pressure campaign that started last March against Iran and its oil exports, the customers, their shadow fleet that brought the Iranian economy to its knees in December. They had a very large bank failure. The central bank had to come in, rescue the bank, printed money, caused great inflation, and the people went out onto the streets. And that was the real turning point for this regime. The regime is in trouble. I said last week on another show that they're in Hitler's bunker and Hitler's dead. Well, I can tell you, as of this week, Himmler and Göring are dead too. The leadership has been decapitated, and contrary to what the mainstream media in the U.S. wants you to believe, they are in chaos. They are having trouble communicating, and all these rocket launches that you see are the death throes of a dying regime.
Yeah, and you know, the escalation overnight and the president tweeting and posting on Truth Social about there will be no more attacks on that very important gas and oil infrastructure in Iran because it triggered Qatar. I feel like there was an escalation. Can you tell us anything about what the president is trying to message out here? He's been very, very direct in terms of obliterating Iran's military infrastructure, but holding back in terms of hitting the oil and gas infrastructure.
Yeah, and Maria, on the military, last night was the biggest night for strikes thus far in this campaign. As we move into days 19 and 20, we keep escalating the military campaign. President Trump wants to have something for the Iranian people on the other side, so we are not attacking their energy infrastructure. On Karg Island, which is the nexus, 90% of Iranian oil comes out of there. We did a precision strike against all the military targets on that island, and none of the energy assets were targeted. So we have allowed Iranian oil to continue out of the Gulf, where some Indian tankers have moved out, some Chinese tankers have moved out. And Maria, to be clear, this is a coordinated effort. We had a break the glass plan across the administration and at Treasury. We unsanctioned Russian oil. We knew that there were about 130 million barrels on the water, and we created supply that is beyond the Straits of Hormuz. So we anticipated this. We knew that there could be a temporary, and I want to emphasize temporary, choke point there, and there was 130 million barrels of floating storage. In the coming days, we may unsanction the Iranian oil that's on the water. It's about 140 million barrels. So depending on how you count it, that's 10 days to 2 weeks of supply that the Iranians had been pushing out. That would have all gone to China. In essence, we will be using the Iranian barrels against the Iranians to keep the price down for the next 10 or 14 days as we continue this campaign. So we have lots of levers. We've got plenty more that we can do. The largest coordinated SPR release in history, 400 million barrels, was approved last week. And some countries are going to do more. The U.S. could unilaterally do another SPR release to keep the price down. As you will have noted, WTI and its European counterpart Brent have substantially diverged over the past few trading sessions. They were trading right on top of each other last week. And this is because the U.S., thanks to President Trump in his first term, the continuing efforts here, is virtually energy independent. And when President Trump says our allies should join us in a coalition along the Straits of Hormuz, that they're the ones who need this oil. The U.S., we're an oil exporter.
Absolutely. And you're hitting at exactly the point that I was making at the top of this interview, and that is you are walking this balance of energy stability versus keeping the pressure on Iran. In terms of the Treasury intervening in markets, I mean, Secretary, markets have been under pressure, obviously, from the beginning of this conflict. The Dow down nearly 6%, the S&P and the NASDAQ down as oil prices move higher. I mean, Brent at one point this morning was at $118 after those attacks overnight that we talked about on the key energy facilities. You've said no plans to intervene in markets specifically. What conditions would force Treasury to intervene?
Well, Maria, we're talking about two things here. I think there's been some speculation that U.S. Treasury would intervene in the futures market, and we're absolutely not doing that. But we are intervening in markets by creating this excess supply with oil that's on the water. So, in essence, by the time we unsanction the floating Iranian oil, we would have intervened and we would have created about 260 million excess barrels of energy. And if you think that the temporary closure in the Strait is leading to about a 10 to 14 million barrel per day deficit, then that is, depending on how you count it, approximately three weeks of oil to stabilize the market. So that is a physical intervention. We are not going to do a financial market intervention. Maria, you get these price spikes. We got one Sunday 2 weeks ago. It was a big price spike. Then we had the largest sell-off in history. And my 40 years in the market, I always found, especially people who work for me, when they lost a lot of money, they said that there was some mysterious intervention rather than bad trading. So to be clear, we're not intervening in the financial markets. We are supplying the physical markets.
Well, I'm glad that you pointed out the difference in terms of where Brent is and where U.S. crude is, because I was very taken aback when our European friends said we're not going to get involved and send warships to the Strait of Hormuz. We know that particularly Europeans need that strait even more so than the United States, much more, as they are relying on their LNG. And 20% of LNG is passed through, supposed to be passing through that every day. And natural gas has been surging, right? And they need that for electricity. When the Europeans said, this is not my war, this is not our war, Did the president discuss what he could answer? I mean, that could, set up the president for saying, well, Ukraine is not my war.
I think the president's been very clear here that he believes that those who are benefiting from these actions in their economies should contribute. And I think over time we will likely see a clarification here that that NATO, maybe some of our Asian allies will not directly get involved in the fighting as we continue the bombing campaign. I would be surprised that if eventually there isn't some kind of a global coalition to escort ships through the Strait of Hormuz. It'd be very disappointing for those who benefit the most not to do something.
And of course, the Prime Minister of Japan is at the White House today. You will be meeting with her, and I know this is a very close relationship. Are you expecting Japan to change its stance on this and perhaps get more involved in this fight and support the United States?
But again, they don't have to be involved in the actual bombing campaign. But I would expect that Japan, who gets, I can't remember, 95% of their crude supplies from the Gulf, would be very interested in making sure that these supplies, they are safe. The Japanese Navy is one of the three great navies in the world. They have some of the best minesweepers and mine detection capabilities. So, I think we're going to have a very good discussion with the Prime Minister. President Trump has an excellent relationship with her. She very popular, and with his endorsement, she recorded a record in post-war Japan history in terms of her margin in the parliament. So, she's in a very strong position. She's very pro-U.S. I think we're going to have a very good discussion today.
And of course, she was one of the first, when this first started, to say she wanted to unleash oil into the market to pressure prices. She's been supportive in terms of understanding the issues here at hand where oil prices are spiking.
She's been very supportive, yeah. And the Japanese have a very large strategic petroleum reserve. My guess is that they will begin releasing in excess of what the IEA equivalent release would have been. So, I think they're going to supply the market. And again, they're a good ally, and the relationship with the president is very good. On the other hand, we have the Chinese, who have once again proven themselves to be unreliable suppliers. This is why the U.S., we are determined. We don't want to decouple via trade, but we do need a strategic decoupling. And what the Chinese have stopped exporting during the Iran conflict here is they've cut off all refined product exports to the rest of the world. So people who are depending on them, countries who are depending on them for jet fuel, other refined products, they are now in the lurch, and the U.S. continues to export energy.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and the president, of course, postponing that trip to China, and he is going to be here focused on the war.
I want to be clear. I want to be clear on the postponement of that trip. Postponement of that trip was the logistics during this conflict. President Trump believes that it's important for him to stay here in the United States, not travel abroad. It had nothing to do with an ask to the Chinese to get involved with the Straits of Hormuz. So It was a decision by the president to move the date out.
Yes, I understand that, sir. And I think that's completely practical. I understand that fully. The president needs to be here in Washington, in the United States. When a war with Iran is undergoing. But let's put that aside for a moment, because China has been complicit the whole time. And we know that China has been supporting Iran for a long time, buying 90% of Iranian exports, 90%, helping in terms of components, helping in a number of ways. So did this issue come up when you had your conversations in Paris last week with your Chinese counterparts, that China has obviously been supporting our number one adversary for a long time?
Well, Maria, you put your finger on something that, Iran is the head of the snake for global terrorism. They are the leading state sponsor of terrorism. And the Chinese have been buying 95% of the Iranian oil. So they were funding the leading sponsor of global terrorism. They were getting a discount by buying that oil. When we go through as we plan to unsanction the Iranian oil, that oil will go up to a market price, and it will end up in places other than China. It can flow into Malaysia, Singapore, Indonesia, Japan, India, who have been good actors in this.
Mm-hmm. And I wonder, the president made an interesting point recently. I don't know if it was flippant or not, when he said we'd like to take over the Strait of Hormuz at some point. Iran apparently is working on a law to charge ships for the Hormuz safe passage. Would the president consider that in terms of once you do get control of the strait, start charging ships that travel through it?
Again, this is nonsense, Maria. For the regime, we're back to the stuff of Baghdad Bob here. The regime is in collapse, and the people are starting to turn against them. We're starting to see defections. At Treasury, we now know where the Iranian leadership bank accounts are, and those are being frozen. And we will hold them and see who comes forward in terms of defections. But we're starting to see defections throughout the regime, and that's how this ends. So the idea of some tolling arrangement is ridiculous. What President Trump is talking about, and to be clear, he has focused on Kharg Island since 1988, before the Shah fell, that the U.S. should be focused on that. He is laser focused on it. As I said, there was a bombing campaign last week. The military assets on Kharg Island were destroyed. And the other thing I can tell you, if you're an oil worker, you don't want to work there. So all the oil workers there are being coerced to stay there. And we will see what happens with whether that eventually becomes a U.S. asset.
What would be your best assessment or expectation for the impact of all of this on the economy, Secretary? Of course, we've got oil prices spiking now. We understand that your expectation is that this is a temporary situation. But you have had growth, deregulation, economic issues that are positive for the growth of this country on its economy as your number one priority before this conflict. How does that change?
Well, again, Maria, I think we have to get the American people and our entire government back in the mindset of there is no prosperity without security. There's no prosperity without security. Any prosperity without security is an illusion. So now President Trump, by doing this, we will be more secure than ever. As Vice President Vance said yesterday, this is short term. We are going to get to the other side of this. And Maria, I think it's a decided lack of imagination, both market participants and the foreign policy commentariat blob. Let's imagine what this looks like on the other side.
Right.
With Maduro gone in Venezuela, it looks like Cuba, that there may be very slow motion regime change there. Iran and this horrible sponsor of global terrorism, their military is degraded. They are unable to project power. And then, at some point, Russia-Ukraine will get solved. And, I think gas prices, energy prices will be lower than they were on February 28th for an extended period of time. I've met with the many bank CEOs, with real economy CEOs, and I can tell you the economy is strong, the consumer is strong, so the economy went into this conflict in a very good place. We did it from a position of strength, not a position of weakness.
Right, I understand, but we were talking about 5% growth, close to it in the fourth quarter. Are we still talking about 3% growth for 2026?
Maria, I think it can be above that. I think it can be non-inflationary growth. And again, this is temporary. We will move beyond this, and we will come out on the other side, and the growth will be better, and our security will be real, not illusory.
Yeah, and I appreciate very much your focus on national security, the president's agenda on national security. I understand that very clearly. Have you changed your assessment of tariffs in the face of all of this? Because, of course, we've got these dueling Section 301 investigations underway. China is among those that you're looking at in a number of ways in terms of this results of the IEEPA decision from the Supreme Court. Should we expect any change in your tariff strategy given the spikes that we've seen in commodities like oil, like fertilizer, et cetera, et cetera?
Not at all. And Maria, to be clear, there are no tariffs on nitrogen-based fertilizer, which the farmer in your previous segment talked about. Secretary Rollins will likely be making an announcement on fertilizer in the next few days. And the tariff investigations via Section 301 continue. USTR Jameson Greer will be doing their studies, and we will get the results of those in July, and we will see what happens. But the expectation, if the studies are complete, successful, would be that the tariff regime would be under a new authority and unchanged. But again, that's contingent on successful 301 investigations.
Secretary, before you go, let me end on the Federal Reserve, because we understand that the confirmation hearing and the confirmation process for Kevin Warsh is pretty much on hold as this investigation continues into Jay Powell. You know the facts after James Boasberg reversed or said that he did not approve of those subpoenas on Jay Powell, causing Jeanine Pirro to say, I'm going to appeal, sparking Tom Tillis to say, well, then I'm digging in and I'm going to keep this up. You heard what the chairman said yesterday. He's got no intention of stepping down or leaving the Fed altogether until this investigation is closing. Has the president made any decision in terms of ending this probe into Jay Powell so that you can get Kevin Warsh moving into the chairman's spot?
Well, Maria, to be clear, it is not the president's decision. It is Jeanine Pirro, the U.S. attorney for D.C., and I'm not going to comment on an ongoing investigation. We'll see where this goes. But what is going to happen? Kevin Warsh has been up on the Hill meeting senators. The meetings are going very well. There will be a hearing. What will be held if Senator Tillis insists on waiting until the investigation ends? Then what will be held up is the vote. And Chair Powell, it's his decision to stay as a governor or not. And historic, I would tell you, that would be out of historic norms. Only one former chair has stayed on as a governor, and the President of the United States asked him to stay. I can't imagine President Trump's going to ask Chair Powell to stay on as a governor.
Right. Secretary, it's good to have you this morning. Thanks for taking all of that on. We so appreciate your leadership, sir. Thank you.
Maria, good to be with you.
All right. Secretary Scott Bessent joining us. We'll be right back.